Hey everybody, welcome to the Mana Leak. I'm John as always, and it's time for the blue Kaladesh set review. 3 quick disclaimers off the top. If you want to hear more in depth about them, you should go back and watch the white set review, which you should watch anyways. It doesn't make sense to watch one color and not the other. Number 1, this is a limited set review. This is going to be about draft and sealed. I'm not rating cards in terms of standard or legacy or modern or EDH or anything like that. Number 2, I've not played with these cards. This is my first impression of these cards, mildly rating the cards in a vacuum and trying to guess about the format, but I haven't played with them, so my ratings may change over time, as everybody's always does. Nobody is always 100% correct at the start of the set review season, and that's why I do my top 10 cards that I was wrong about video at the end of the season. Finally, number 3, these are my ratings. This is my opinion on these cards. You may not agree, and that's fantastic. Let me know about it in the comments down below. Set reviews should not ever be, I don't care who they come from. I fully respect and absolutely massively enjoy Marshall and LSV, for example, from the Limited Resources podcast. But you should never just say, well, they're correct. You should take it as a starting point for discussions of the cards and learn from each other. Nobody is always 100% correct. I certainly am not. If you disagree, let me know. Have a discussion down in the comments. Let me know your views on cards. So those are the 3 quick disclaimers. Go back to yesterday if you want further in-depth information on those, but they're pretty self-explanatory. Without further ado, we're going to jump right on into the first card. Up first, we have Ether Meltdown, and I'm not even going to, I'm going to slightly get into how much I hate that they've retconned the word aether into ether by separating the ligature on the AE, but keeping the A around for some stupid reason. But yes, despite what the word looks like, they are saying it is pronounced ether. Yay. Ether Meltdown, 1 and a blue for an enchantment aura at uncommon. It has flash. Enchant creature or vehicle. We'll of course talk about vehicles once we get to the artifacts. When Ether Meltdown enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy. Enchanted permanent gets -4, -0. I like this quite a bit. It's really close to Jace's Ingenuity from Shadows over Innistrad, which was 1 and a blue for an instant. Target creature gets -4, -0, and you got a clue, which meant you get to draw a card. Trading that clue for 2 energy and making the -4, -0 permanent? That sounds pretty good. This obviously isn't quite revoke privileges, but I'll still be very super happy to play with this. Leaving behind a blocker isn't that big of a deal when that blocker's power has been totally crippled. I don't know that I'll first pick this all that often, like I will revoke privileges, but I'll take this still pretty darn highly and be happy to play every copy that I have. I'm going to go with a solid B- on this. Not any higher because it doesn't kill the creature, it leaves the blocker, etc., but it still pretty cripples them, so B-. Up next is Ether Theorist. It's 1 and a blue for a creature Vidalcan Rogue at common. It's a 1/3. When Ether Theorist enters the battlefield, you get energy, 3 energy counters. Tap, pay 1 energy, scry 1. This could be okay in a grindy sort of late game deck. This is basically a Scryfish with a power, Scryfish being Sigiled Starfish from a couple of previous sets, which was an 0/3 for 1 and a blue that you could tap and scry. You obviously didn't have to pay energy. If you can get more activations, this gets better, but if not, I think it gets a little bit worse. I think that puts this right in the mid-pack area because it's not quite worth taking early, and not worth it at all if you're not heading towards a later game plan. I'm going to start with kind of a C on this. If you only get the 3 energy from this and get just 3 activations out of it, I don't think it's that great. But if you have additional energy sources, this could get quite a bit better. So I'm going to go with a C. I think it's probably slightly worse than Sigiled Starfish, which I usually would have rated as like a C+. But I could see it go slightly higher if the format's kind of favorable to it, meaning that the format allows later game decks to exist. Ether Trade Winds is next. It's 2 and a blue for an instant at common. Return target permanent you control and target permanent you don't control to their owner's hands. This is similar to Peel from Reality, which was back in Ravnica, but it only hit creatures, but it cost 1 mana less. The downside here is that this is more expensive. The surface upside is that this can bounce planeswalkers and artifacts and such. The other upside, which is probably the biggest, is that your permanent doesn't have to match their permanent. So you can bounce, I don't know, a puzzle knot, a wimpy little 1 or 2 mana artifact that's not really doing anything, and in exchange bounce their giant 6 mana flying demon. So that's kind of a nice upside there. Peel was horrible if you were behind and had no creatures, but with this you can at least bounce their threat and a land of yours or something like that. So I do think this is still totally fine, and probably a little bit better than Peel from Reality, which probably was like a C, I think. So Ether Trade Winds, I'm willing to go up to a C+. It does kind of suck that you do have to bounce something of yours, but the ability to bounce a land, if that's your best option, or just a crummy little artifact, really helps out a little bit. So I'm going to go with a C+ on Ether Trade Winds. Up next is Ether Squall Ancient. Ether Squall Ancient is 5 blue for a creature Leviathan at rare. It's a 6/6. It has flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get 3 energy. Pay energy, also known as 8 energy. Return all other creatures to their owner's hands. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. 7 mana is an awful lot to ask for, and if this sets as fast as people are predicting, and I don't necessarily agree, I think it will be faster than what we've seen lately, but I don't think it's going to be crazy fast, then 7 mana is asking a lot. But a 6/6 flyer that in 3 turns will bounce your opponent's team, and yours, be careful, seems about worth it. It's going to take some work to get there, and ideally you won't have to wait the 3 full turns. You'll have some backup energy already stored, but it still seems like an absolute beating. I think really this does depend on the speed of the format. Ultimately, it could go from quite good to still unplayable, depending on if this format is slow or if it is blisteringly fast like people think. I don't think it can really breach Super Bomb status just because of the 7 mana. Bruna was amazing in Eldritch Moon, but, she still wasn't much more than a B just because of that ridiculous casting cost. But I will have this start at a B for now. Up next is Ceremonious Rejection. Ceremonious Rejection is a single blue mana for an instant at uncommon. Counter target colorless spell. Yes, this is an artifact set. There's about 50 artifacts in this set. No, you still probably shouldn't ever play this card. It's too narrow. You leave it in the sideboard and side it in when you see a truly horrifying threat that you can't handle in some other way. But most of those are mythic anyways. You're just not gonna see them, in 5 drafts. You may just never see them. 10 drafts, you may just never see a threat that actually wants this card. I don't care that it's 1 mana. I don't care that this is an artifact set. This should sit in your sideboard. It's just way too narrow. Solid D. Up next is Confiscation Coup. Confiscation Coup is 3 blue for a sorcery at rare. Choose target artifact or creature. You get energy, 4 energy counters. Then you may pay an amount of energy equal to that permanent's converted mana cost. If you do, gain control of it, period. It's yours for the rest of the game. Doesn't matter what else happens. Well, if it gets bounced, I guess you lose control. But anyways, Confiscation Coup seems absolutely fantastic. At a minimum, it's a mind control for CMC 4 or less. Plus it grabs artifacts, so it's not just a mind control. It doesn't just grab creatures, which will hit a decent amount of really nice things. If you manage to scrabble together even 2 more energy from somewhere else, you're basically going to take control of almost anything that will ever be on your opponent's side of the board. I guess you can't take their Ether Squall Ancient. You're going to need 1 more energy than the extra 2. This is a snap first pick, much like Mind Control was. It just seems like a straight up solid A. Just not quite an A+, because I can't just instantly steal an Ether Squall Ancient with this by itself, but it takes very little work to actually get there. So solid A. I'm going to snap pick this every single time I see it. Next up is Curio Vendor. Curio Vendor is 1 and a blue for a creature Vidalcan at common. It's a 2/1. That's the end of the story. Did you play Furtive Homunculus or any other 2/1 for 2 in blue that we've had in the recent history of Magic? No. Are you going to play this? No. 2/1s die to everything that ever existed. Take a pass on this. Leave it to the end of the pack. If you're playing it, you are really desperate for creatures. 2/1s are typically only playable when they are 1 mana, not 2 mana, or if you're in just a ridiculously aggressive deck, which blue just doesn't ever really support, and it certainly isn't supported here. So, Curio Vendor, taking a hard pass on it, D-. I will play this when I am just so desperate for creatures. Up next is Disappearing Act. Disappearing Act is 1 blue for an instant at uncommon. As an additional cost to cast Disappearing Act, return a permanent you control to its owner's hand. What do you get for all that? Counter target spell. Yeesh. I mean, sometimes this will be a cool upside, and you'll bounce a Fabricate creature or a creature with a cool enter the battlefield effect, and then you still have to recast it. And you'll get to counter a spell, I guess. But this is just one of the hardest to cast counter spells we've seen in a while. I can't imagine that this will be used reliably enough to be good. This is one of those cards that I'm just not going to touch with a 10-foot pole. You know, best case scenario, assuming no enter the battlefield effects, you pay 3 mana for this and bounce one of those lands, and now you're behind a land just to cast a cancel. I'm not going to touch this card. Just no. I'll give it a D+, just because it's slightly better than Ceremonious Rejection, because it counters everything. And that's the end of that story there. Dramatic Reversal is up next. 1 and a blue for an instant at common. Untap all non-land permanents you control. Yeah, this is also not something that doesn't really feel like it's worth a card. Remember that it exists, but realistically you shouldn't really be playing with or against this. Obviously it can be a massive blowout, but it's also going to be massively telegraphed. You know, they left back few or no blockers and left up 1 blue, and you're saying, hey, that's kind of weird. Well, remember that Dramatic Reversal exists in this set. But this is just such a telegraphed and weak trick that I think this should just be in the packs until the end. Avoid this. Dramatic Reversal just seems really, really, really bad to me. D-. It's a lot of terrible cards in a row. Let's see if we can bring it back this time. Era of Innovation is up next. 1 and a blue for an enchantment at uncommon. Whenever an artifact or artificer enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1 generic mana. If you do, you get 2 energy. Pay 6 energy. Sacrifice Era of Innovation. Draw 3 cards. Yeah, there are a lot of artificers in this set. I think I haven't actually gone through specifically, but I would be willing to bet the majority of humanoid creatures are artificers in this set. So you will be activating this some amount of the time. Plus the artifacts that you cast. You'll be playing some artifacts almost guaranteed. So you'll be getting the energy, but I still just don't think this is good. It's the 1 mana that really kills it for me. If you got the 2 energy without having to pay an extra 1 mana tax on your artifacts and artificers, I think this would be good. But the fact that I have to pay an extra mana, virtually make all of my spells cost more just to get 2 energy, to someday collect 6 energy to draw 3 cards, feels like so much work to me. Feels like so much work to me. I'm not a fan of do-nothing enchantments unless they really rapidly take off. And I just don't think this is rapidly going to take off. Drawing 3 cards would be awesome, but I feel like there's just so much work put into this. I'll keep an eye on it because it could be something like Ongoing Investigation, which at first looked a little bit like a do-nothing enchantment to me and turned out to be absolutely amazing. But the thing with Ongoing Investigation, of course, was that, you know, you dropped it on turn 2 and it just worked. It just worked. This, you put it down and then you have to cast very specific spells, which you'll have a large number of, but still very specific spells to get this going. And you still have to pay for each one to really get it going. I'm going to start low on this. I'm going to start at a C-. I'll keep an eye on it, but I don't think it's actually good. Up next is Experimental Aviator. Experimental Aviator is 3 blue for a creature human artificer. There we go, there's an artificer. At uncommon, it's a 0/3 flyer. When Experimental Aviator enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying. So it's a 2/5 flyer for 5, which, I mean, maybe I'd play that, but I really don't think so. It's really nice, however, that you can attack with the 2 1/1s while keeping back a mildly okay 0/3 body to block. 0/3 blockers typically are not the best, though. You want 0/4s usually. 0/3s just tend to die to a lot of things. Not as quickly, but by turn 5 or turn 6, yeah. So really, I just don't know about this. If you can abuse those Thopters with counters, or you have the Thopter Lord or the Artifact Lord or something like that, I think this is just absolutely fantastic. But I think in other decks, I'm going to slightly avoid this, not terribly avoided. I'll still play it if I have a reason to go in the top end. I have been totally blindsided by how good cards that do similar things to this, namely a crummy creature that makes a flyer, but they've always been 3-drops, not 5-drops with 2 color commitments to it. Well, not 2 different colors, but 2 color pips. So I'll keep an eye on this, but 5 mana just feels like a lot for an 0-3 blocker with 2 1/1s. So I'll start at a C. I'm ready for this to be one of my top 10 cards that I was wrong about, but I'm going to start with a C. Obviously, your mileage may vary if you have those Thopter or Artifact Lords, but C to start in a kind of average deck. Up next is Failed Inspection. Failed Inspection is 2 blue for an instant at common. Counter target spell, draw a card, then discard a card. So for 4 mana, you get to counter a spell and loot. No, just like the other counter spells, no, not really what I'm going to be doing in Limited. 4 mana counters are just so rarely worth it, and this one just, it joins the pantheon of ones that aren't really worth it. As usual with counters, note that it becomes slightly more playable in Sealed, which will almost always be slower, and you'll have time to just pass the turn holding up mana and not play anything. But in Draft, you really probably shouldn't be playing this, so D-, leave it in the sideboard, and really don't ever take it out. Gear Seeker Serpent is up next. It's 5 blue for a creature serpent at common. It's a 5/6. Gear Seeker Serpent costs 1 generic mana less to cast for each artifact you control. It has affinity, but it's not called affinity. 5 and a blue. Gear Seeker Serpent can't be blocked this turn. Everyone, of course, is going to think about the best case scenario where, hey, this costs 2 blue. This costs blue for a 5/6 if I just have, 5 artifacts out. The odds of that happening before turn 7, when you could just cast this anyway, is really low. A further knock against this is that there's no Fabricate in blue. So you're not necessarily going to have a million servo artifacts kicking around to fuel this out early. Ultimately, this does feel like a big dumb creature with a very expensive activated ability, albeit a good one. Flat out not being able to be blocked is a decent ability on a 5/6. I just think if you have a lot of Fabricate in your other colors, so if you're blue-white, or if you're blue-green, or if you're blue-black, then I think you could go off with it. Or if you do have a lot of artifacts and you're really desperate for a game ender and you missed getting one, this could be okay. But I think this is one of those game enders, those top-end kind of this is how I win the game cards in the bottom tier of those cards. This is, oops, I didn't get a really good rare or a really good uncommon or anything really, and I need a way to end the game, so here's this. So I'm going to give it a C, but I'm not really going to go any higher on it. Yeah, it's cool to be discounted. Yeah, being unblockable is nice. Paying 6 mana for that is not nice, so C for me. Up next is Glimmer of Genius. Glimmer of Genius is 3 and a blue for an instant at uncommon. Scry 2, then draw 2 cards. But that's not all, you also get 2 energy. This is just the Billy Mays of cards. Yeah, this is probably very playable. Inspiration was relatively playable, which was 3 and a blue for an instant. Target player draws 2 cards. So this is the same card, except you get to look at your top 2 cards first, sort them exactly how you want, and then draw 2, and then you get 2 energy for any energy outlets that you have kicking around. This seems really solid. Obviously, it doesn't slot well into an aggro deck, but if you're even slightly mid-rangey to control-y, and as long as this format isn't ridiculously fast, this should be a card that you're very happy to play and pick pretty high mid-pack. I'm going to go with a B- on it. I don't really like going any higher than that on pure draw cards, but yeah, B-. This seems totally playable to me. Up next is Glint Nest Crane. Glint Nest Crane is 1 blue for a creature bird at uncommon. It's a 1/3. It has flying. When Glint Nest Crane enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So a 1/3 flyer for 2 with pure upside is fine. 1/3 flyers have historically been fine. They're never exciting. They're often used as blockers, as a way to block flyers that are going to potentially give you threats, because usually up for several turns they'll be 2 power, and so this just shuts them down. This will grow in a number of mid-range control-y decks as a 23rd card from the stats, though they might miss the cut in an aggro deck. If this can fairly reliably draw a card for you, so I'd guess that somewhere around 6 or so artifacts is what you're going to be looking for in order to hope hopefully relatively reliably ensure that there's one in your top 4, then this becomes pretty decent. Any fewer than that, and I think you should probably be questioning if you really want this in your deck. So I'm going to go with a C+, assuming that artifacts are plentiful enough in the average deck. If you are relatively low on artifacts, this probably drops more to a C. So yeah, kind of C for Glint Nest Crane. Up next is High Tide Hermit. High Tide Hermit is 4 and a blue for a creature crab at common. It's a 4/4. It has Defender. When High Tide Hermit enters the battlefield, you get 4 energy. Pay 2 energy. High Tide Hermit can attack this turn as though it didn't have Defender. This is really kind of into the range of big dumb creatures. It's a 5 mana 4/4 without Trample, Flying, Death Touch, First Strike, or anything that helps it from not just running into creatures or trading to a double block. Having to pay 2 of my energy for the privilege of doing that? No, I'm out on this. I'm willing to give it a D+, because maybe in an energy-heavy deck I could maybe see playing this as a desperation move, or maybe out of the sideboard, but even then I think it's a really iffy move. D+ is probably generous. That's what I'll go with. But yeah, let's go D+ on High Tide Hermit. Insidious Will is up next. 2 blue for an instant at rare. Choose one. Counter target spell, because we don't have enough counter spells yet. You may choose new targets for target spell, or copy target instant or sorcery spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So it's 2 blue to counter a spell, or 2 blue to redirect a spell, or 2 blue to fork a spell. 4 mana counter spell. No, I've already talked about that, in fact. And that 4 mana counterspell let me loot. 4 mana redirect, when redirect was traditionally blue for that effect. No. And fork is red, and we're paying 4 for a fork. No. I assume this must be for constructed. Obviously, in a constructed control deck, 4 mana is not that big of a deal. You're passing the turn every turn anyways, and the versatility is probably great. Constructed, I'm making no claims because I don't really play constructed yet. I'm hoping to get back into it. Constructed, whatever. This is probably way better than it's going to be here. Here, D? I'm just not going to play this card in limited. Again, sealed, probably, yes, but draft? No, I'm out. Solid D for me. Next up is Genji, or is it Yanjeet or Yanyeet? I don't know. Sentry. Genji Sentry is 2 and a blue for a creature Vidalcan Soldier at uncommon. It's a 2/3. When Genji Sentry enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy. Tap, pay 2 energy. You may tap or untap target artifact or creature. I think this is a trap. I think it's a trap, plain and simple. It's a 3 mana 2/3, so I'm already at 23rd card status unless the ability is awesome. The ability is awesome. Tappers are fantastic, and tapper untappers can lead to some really cool, powerful interactions. But this gets to be activated 1 time by itself. You get to activate this 1 single time with the 2 energy that it makes. You are going to require serious energy production in order for this to really function even slightly the way that you want it to. And I just don't think that you can get there without the absolute god energy deck. The kind of decks that want a tapper want to be tapping something every single turn and taking longer than the average deck to finish the game, because you're saying tap, you can't attack. Tap, you can't attack. Tap, you can't attack. And like turn 9, you start doing something. And I just don't think that you're ever going to have enough energy to do that. I just don't think that you're reliably going to be able to do what you want to do with this creature, because I don't think energy production is going to be that plentiful. I think it's going to be plentiful enough if you want it, but not plentiful enough to be spending 2 mana every single turn. So I'm going to start on a hard cut on this at a C-. I'm going to cut it pretty reliably. Next up is Longfin Sky Whale. Longfin Sky Whale is 2 blue for a creature whale at uncommon. It's a 4/3. It has flying, as whales often do. Longfin Sky Whale can block only creatures with flying. So Welcome Turns and Tattered Haunters, which you're probably pretty familiar with, 1 and a blue for a 2/1 flyer that can only block other flyers, are decent for a bunch of really early damage. A 4/3 for 4 is a little bit different, because it's twice as much damage, but it's twice as much mana cost. It's going to come down later. If your opponent's light on flyers, it's still likely to be really awesome. But that double blue can hamper it a little bit. You may not get it till turn 5 or turn 6. I'll keep an eye on this. I'm inclined to believe that this is probably about on level with Tattered Haunter and Welkin Turn and the such, which I love. I love more than they are worth. Not too much more than they're worth. They are good, but I do like them a little bit better than I should. I'll start this at a C+. It's entirely possible that I'm either under or over biased on this. And obviously, if your opponent just doesn't have flyers, this is going to wreck them. This is going to totally wreck them. So, be prepared to aggressively play this against something like a red-green deck. But yeah, I think this is a pretty solid card. I don't know 100% where I take it. I don't think it's a first pick. And I don't think it's like first few picks. Maybe it is. 4/3 flyer for 4 is pretty beefy. I'm torn on this. I'm really torn on this. I said C+. No, I think it might even be better than that. Let's go B-. I really like efficiently costed flyers with the can only block flyers downside because, frankly, I don't really view that as a downside all that often. Yeah, so let's go with a B-. Let's start B- on Longfin Sky Whale. Up next is Malfunction. Malfunction is 3 and a blue for an enchantment or a common. Enchant artifact or creature. When Malfunction enters the battlefield, tap enchanted permanent. Enchanted permanent doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. This is identical to Sleep Paralysis from Shadows of Innistrad, except it can hit artifacts too, although I'd expect most artifacts that you want to keep tapped down are creatures anyways, so it's not that big of a deal. This will be very playable and a solidly high pick. Oh, actually, I guess the bonus of it hitting artifacts is you can hit an uncrewed vehicle, and then the vehicle can't attack. That makes sense. Yeah, this will be a super high pick, probably even a first pick in weaker packs. Basically a pack that doesn't have a bomb or an unconditional kind of get off the board removal, but this is also relatively unconditional removal anyways, as much as blue will get. So you should pick this accordingly, play it very regularly. I'm going to go with a solid B on Malfunction. Just seems fantastic. Well, somehow it's taken all this time to finally get to a Mythic in blue, but here we are. Metallurgic Summonings is up next. 3 blue for an enchantment at Mythic. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create an XX colorless construct artifact creature token where X is the spell's converted mana cost. Pay 3 blue, exile Metallurgic Summonings, return all instant and sorcery cards from your graveyard to your hand. Activate this ability only if you control 6 or more artifacts, also known as double Metalcraft, or at least it is right now. I like this a lot for constructed and fun and not remotely for limited. I assume this is an attempt to make a standard blue-red spells deck work. Along with the support from Eldritch Moon and Shadows of Innistrad, plus the Rise from the Tides F&M promo kind of supports the idea that Wizards thinks or wants or expected a blue-red spells deck to really take off in Limited. I know there is one. Is it Machine Gun or whatever it is? But I think this is just another push to get that to be a thing. I don't think this works in Limited, though. Well, we had a brief love affair with the deck made mostly of spells in Eldritch Moon. I think those days are over. I don't think the blue-red spells deck exists even remotely as much as it did in Eldritch Moon. This will be a do-nothing enchantment a huge amount of the time. You know my usual prowess argument that you're just not going to activate prowess as remotely as much as you hope you will. You'll activate it once or twice. Similarly, I think you'll activate this once or twice. And then getting 6 artifacts on the board, especially in blue with no fabricate, I don't see it. Avoid this. Don't play it. I just don't see it being good. I think it's a stone F in Limited. Constructed, I think it looks awesome. I want this to be a thing. But Limited, I don't think it's going to be a thing. F. Up next is Minister of Inquiries. Minister of Inquiries is a single blue mana for a 1/2 creature Vidalcan Advisor at uncommon. When Minister of Inquiries enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy. Tap, pay 1 energy. Target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Hey, here's the mill card. Nope. I was concerned about the possibility of not having enough energy available for the amazing tapping on tapping ability of Genji Sentry. This costs half as much energy for a massively worse ability. I just don't think you're ever going to have enough energy to do what you want to do with this guy, which is, of course, win the game. You're going to activate this a few times, mill some cards, and it's going to have absolutely no effect whatsoever. Yeah, this just isn't going to happen. If you didn't have to tap this, maybe, because then you could go energy, mill 3, energy, mill 3, get some other energy from somewhere, energy, mill 3, but that, of course, would have been ridiculously powerful. That tap puts this right into the trash pile, right into a solid F. As well, you're not going to mill somebody out with this by getting a bunch of copies of it because it's uncommon, which means you're not going to get the 4 or 5 copies of this, which you would really need to, quote-unquote, go off with these guys. Solid F. This should be last pick. Just don't do it. Solid F. Up next is Nimble Innovator. Nimble Innovator is 3 and a blue for a creature Vidalcan Artificer at common to 2/2. When Nimble Innovator enters the battlefield, draw a card. Yeah, in M15, this card was called Shaman of the Spring, and it was in green. 3 and a blue for a 2/2 that drew a card. It was very solid, and it should be right at home here in blue. I mean, green wants to draw cards because it doesn't often get to. Blue is known for drawing cards, so, this fits right in. The body's slightly weak, but the card draw is slightly great. Absolutely awesome. Never a first pick, but you should be pretty happy to play 1 or 2 of these and take it mid-pack without even thinking twice about it. It just seems like a solid card to me. If the format is blisteringly fast, a 4-mana 2/2 might be a problem, but I don't buy the predictions that this format's going to be blisteringly fast. So I'm pretty happy with this. I'm willing to give it a C+. Up next is Padim, Consul of Innovation. 3 and a blue for a legendary creature, Vidalcan Artificer at rare. It's a 1/4. He's a 1/4? Looks like a he. Artifacts you control have hexproof. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control the artifact with the highest converted mana cost, or tied for the highest converted mana cost, draw a card. A 1/4 for 4 isn't great. Giving your artifacts hexproof is alright, getting better, of course, if your artifacts are mostly creatures. Drawing a card each turn is where this really starts to get good and justifies its casting cost of 4 mana. Again, like many cards, this entirely depends on your artifact count. If you have, 6 or 7, seems great. If you have 3 or 4, seems less good. If I had only 2 or 3, I'd probably even be cutting Padim. I will have to watch how this plays out because my first instinct is that it isn't build-aroundy enough to be first picked. I don't think taking this is the signpost to take you into the artifact deck because, oh boy, my artifacts are going to have hexproof and I'm going to draw a card if I have the biggest artifact. Doesn't quite get there. I'll start off at a B-, assuming you have more than a couple artifacts. If you have less, this is like a C-, but let's start with a B- for Padim. Up next is Paradoxical Outcome. Paradoxical Outcome is 3 and a blue for an instant at rare. Return any number of target, non-land, non-token permanents you control to their owner's hands. Draw a card for each card returned to your hand this way. I just... What? I've never played with an effect like this. It can't actually be good, though, right? I mean, I wouldn't pay 2 mana for Altar's Reap to throw away, although kill, not return to hand, 1 creature for 2 cards. Needing to ditch 2 creatures for those 2 cards, plus 2 extra mana for the upside that they come to my hand and I can recast them. No, just not into this at all. You can't even do something like toss away your servos that aren't doing anything because it's only non-token permanents. Maybe this is good somehow, but I'm just really not seeing it. If it bounced them, it would be ridiculously powerful. But returning to hand and forcing me to recast them, like even if I'm getting really good end of the battlefield effects, I'm not going to be dumping my hand. I'm going to be, I'm going to have to spend the full mana cost to recast my Fabricate creatures and my Cloud Drifter and etc. Plus, I'm going to have double the cards in my hand. So I'm probably going to have to discard if I did more than like 3 or 4. I don't think this card's good. It can't be good, right? I'll have to keep an eye on it, but I'm going to start on an F. I just don't see this being good. F from me. Up next is Revolutionary Rebuff. It's 1 and a blue for an instant at common. Counter target non-artifact spell unless its controller pays 2 generic mana. Oh, Mana Leak. What happened to you? You used to be cool. Costing the same cost as Mana Leak, but forcing your opponent to only pay 2 generic mana instead of 3, and only hitting non-artifact spells in an artifact-heavy block just seems bad. Nope, sorry. See ya, I'm out on this. I'm not playing this card or taking it with any intent of playing it. Convolute, I played a bit because 4 generic mana was a lot to pay. 2 generic mana, yeah, you need to use rebuff on like turn 2 or 3, or else it's just going to end up being a dead card in your hand for a long time. I'm out on this card. I think it's bad. D-, get out of there. Up next is Sahihs Artistry. Sahihs Artistry is 4 blue for a sorcery at rare. Choose one, or both. Create a token that's a copy of target artifact. And or create a token that's a copy of target creature, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. 6 mana is a lot, but of course you could live the dream and target a Gear Hulk twice, because you could target it as the artifact, you could target it as the creature, and just, boy, go to town. Yeah, what's more is that this can copy anything, not just your own things. Your opponent has a Gear Hulk? Well, guess what? Now you have 2 copies of it. It's only the mana cost that's really holding this back slightly for me, but it really could not cost less because of the potential just massive upside that this has. Costing any less would just be broken. Unless the format's blisteringly fast, which I don't predict it to be, but I do think it will be faster than what we've seen. This is likely to be a very solid first pickable card. If the format is blisteringly fast, it may just be too expensive. I'm going to start at a B, and I will first pick it to start until I get a real handle on the format. I don't think I'll go any higher, though, regardless, just because you do have to have targets. You will have targets. The question, of course, is are they worth 6 mana? Hopefully the answer is usually yes, but because of that, I will just sit at a B. Up next is Select for Inspection, which looks directly out of the Star Wars prequel movies. Single blue mana for an instant ecom and return target tapped creature to its owner's hand. Scry 1. I was waiting for the bounce spell. I love bounce. You guys know me. I love bounce. But this is not the bounce spell that I was looking for. Sure, it's cute to say, but hey, more creatures will be tapped in this format because of vehicles. That also means that I need to be hit with, or at least threatened to be hit with, a vehicle. And then what? I probably need to bounce the vehicle, so it didn't really matter that the crewing creature was tapped. I don't know. I mean, maybe I love bounce so much that I'll play this anyways. And you get to scry, so that's cool. I just really dislike that this card does nothing unless I'm being attacked. Very similar to, what was the one black from Shadows of Innistrad? Murderous Impulse, I think, or whatever it was. Yeah, just needing the creature to be tapped means that something bad happened, or something bad was about to happen, and this is just too reactionary. It's too blah. Why isn't there an awesome just unsummon in this set? This is so sad for me. I've got to go with a C- on this. I think this is just super mediocre, and honestly the C- I think is me just loving bounce. I think realistically it's like a D+. On summon. Where are you? Up next is Shrewd Negotiation. Shrewd Negotiation is 4 and a blue for a sorcery at uncommon. Exchange control of target artifact you control and target artifact or creature you don't control. There's some very important wording in there. You are giving away an artifact you control. You are taking an artifact or a creature from your opponent, and that makes this really, really, really nice. This could be really decent, but it does depend on just how many artifacts, and especially artifact creatures, are in the average deck. Switcheroo was a good card in M13. It was basically this card. I think it was possibly 3 blue, and it purely switched creature for creature. The upside here is higher, but it does require you to be playing artifacts, so keep that in mind. This might even be a reason to play something like a Puzzle Knot, because you could trade a Puzzle Knot for their really good creature, and the fact that it doesn't even have to be an artifact creature that you take is really nice. I think this is going to be pretty solid as long as you do build properly with it. I'm going to start at a B-, but please, 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 please build properly. If you don't have the right number of crummy artifacts, then this becomes too bad. And if you load up on too many crummy artifacts, then your deck becomes bad. So be careful with this card. I'm going to start at a B-. I'm going to keep a close eye on it. I think it might surprise people. I think some people might look at this and go, it's not good. But yeah, I think it could be fairly decent. So I'm going to start at a B-. Up next is Tezzeret's Ambition. Tezzeret's Ambition is 3 blue for a sorcery at common. Draw 3 cards. If you control no artifacts, discard a card. 5 mana, sorcery speed, draw 3, and then discard 1 if I don't have an artifact. No, that's pricey. It's not really the cost that I'm looking to pay too often. In a really control-y deck, it could be okay. Usual disclaimer and sealed, it's probably a little bit better. But I'm going to cut these pretty regularly, I think. The format's going to need to be slow, plus there's going to need to be a solid control deck for this to even slightly begin, being playable-ish. I'm going to cut this pretty hard. I'm going to keep it at a C-. Up next is Thriving Turtle. Thriving Turtle is a single blue mana for a creature turtle at common. It's a 0/3. When Thriving Turtle enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy. Whenever Thriving Turtle attacks, you may pay 2 energy. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on it. No thanks. The amount of work and energy that you're going to need to put into this thing is just so not worth it. It could be an okay sideboard card if you're really desperate to stop some early aggro, or if you're desperate for some energy maybe. But otherwise, this just looks like really similar to the Fancy Camel in white, except that's an 0/4, so it's a better blocker. This shouldn't be making your main deck very often. It's just no. It looks bad to me. I've got to go with a D+ on it. Up next is the Blue Gearhulk, Torrential Gearhulk. It's a 4 blue artifact creature construct, mythic. It's a 5/6 with flash. When Torrential Gearhulk enters the battlefield, you may cast target instant card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that card would be put into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. Snapcaster's back. This is basically the same as casting a Snapcaster and a 4 mana spell, which seems pretty darn solid. Now, this does have the downside of not being able to cast sorcery spells, so keep that in mind. But man, if you can cast like a 5 mana spell for free off of this, then things are going to go really good, and it's even better than a Snapcaster. And even the stats alone, I'd be playing this thing. A 5/6 flash for 6? I wouldn't be excited about it, but it would be one of those kind of, I need a top end. The ability just seems so good for me to make this a snap first pick. After that first pick, keep in mind that you do want to be picking up some good instants. But yeah, this just seems fantastic. I'm going to go with a solid A- on it. A- just because you do have to have other things to make this good. You do have to have those instants in your graveyard. But yeah, A-, first pick, easy. Up next is Vidalcan Blademaster. Vidalcan Blademaster is 2 and a blue for a creature Vidalcan soldier at common. It's a 2/3 with prowess. Seems like a pure C to me. As a 2/3 for 3, it's flirting with the C- territory, being, pure sort of cut it most of the time area. Having prowess is a minor boon in limited. As usual, I'll remind you that you're only going to be playing a relatively small number of non-creature spells, so you can only expect to get a single prowess trigger a turn, and probably only once or twice a game on average. Don't get into Magical Christmas Land thinking, hey, this is a 3/4 for 4, or 3/4 for 3 most of the time. It's not going to be. It's going to be a 2/3 most of the time. Yeah, pure C, pure filler, 23rd card. Cut it, keep it, your choice. Weld Fastwing is up next. It's 3 and a blue for a creature human artificer at common. It's a 3/3. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, Weld Fastwing gains flying until end of turn. So it's a hill giant, a 4 mana 3/3, which is unimpressive, but 23rd cardy most of the time. But if you sequence and build it right, then it's a card that typically lives at rare or mythic, a 4 mana 3/3 flyer. My instinct, with, of course, having not played this set yet, is to say that no, you're not going to get this as regularly as you hope. Still, though, you can probably safely include this if you're short on creatures, and if you are building with Fabricate, with servos, with a number of artifacts, then you will snap include this card. I don't think it's any more than a mid-card pickup. It could, though, be the best blue common. We'll talk about that in a second. Best blue common creature. We'll talk about that in a second. Yeah, build properly, take this not terribly highly. C+, seems fine to me, but may just fall filler depending on artifact count. Our final card for blue is a reprint, a very common reprint, a prototypical reprint. Windrake. 2 and a blue for a creature Drake at common. It's a 2/2 flyer. Anytime you see a 3-mana 2/2 flyer, people will say, hey, that's a Windrake. And here is the Windrake. We recently saw a Windrake in white with Dawngryff in Eldritch Moon. This is just a prototypical, pure C-grade flyer. It'll be nice to have these. You are going to play them when you can fit them in and not play them when you don't. And you're never going to quote-unquote waste a pick on them. Yeah, this is just a solid flyer that you will take mid-pack when you see it, and there's not, you know, something even better in blue. So pure C, pure C. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for blue. I'm worried. Blue looks bad. Blue looks really bad. There's some fantastic rares and mythics, but blue looks bad. So much of blue is wasted on counterspells and mediocre creatures and conditional bounce spells. I don't know about blue. Blue looks like a pure support color, and not a good one at that. I hope I'm wrong somewhere, but blue looks bad to me, unfortunately. Let me know what you think of blue. Do you agree? Does blue look really crummy to you? Let me know in the comments down below. As usual, also let me know what cards you agree with, disagree with, what you are thinking about this set so far, etc. Use that comments. It's been used great on the white set review. Keep it going down here. As well, I have started Patreon, patreon.com/themanaleak. If you do want to support my set reviews and product openings and my weekly draft videos and Wacky Wednesdays and Crack-a-Packs and top 10 lists and etc., you can head over to patreon.com/themanaleak. $1, $1,000, doesn't matter. Everything is massively appreciated. As well, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at themanaleak, L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. You can find me at facebook.com/themanaleak and twitch.tv/themanaleak. You've found me here on YouTube. Make use of that comment section. Click that thumbs up icon if you like the content, and subscribe if you want to see more. If you do have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow for the black set review.